Kia ora, welcome to my morning ramble, Friday 15th of July 2022. This morning, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about actually. Okay, well let's talk about wind power this morning. I can hear a cow lowing down the bottom of our field, just tangent. I have a sneaking suspicion our neighbour's cattle have escaped again, but we shall see. Wind power, or wind. If you've followed any of my previous rambles, you'll know that I've been looking at a hybrid approach to our power. Three is better than two, is better than one, and all that, to build some resiliency into our rig, and to make sure that we take advantage of all the resources that we have on the property. So after digging around, doing some research on wind, listening to the naysayers on various channels, forums, videos, and those that swear by it, and looking at the relative sizes of turbines and things. And again, you bear in mind that this is at the moment largely theoretical. But before I'm going to go dropping money on things, I kind of like to have an idea, particularly large amounts, to have an idea of what I'm in for ahead of time. So I was looking at some solar rigs, and I won't go into the exact models, but they're pretty reasonable. And you can pick up a good turbine. You can shop around, but basically you can pick up a good turbine. One that, assuming that you have, a reasonable amount of wind, and that you can get the relative height for the turbine on your property, will generate about 40 kilowatt hours on average per month, which, when you math it, is an average of about 1300 watts per day, 1.3 kilowatt hours of production, which compared to solar is really not that great. If you break it down and assume that that's, by the hour, that's really only about, 50 watts per hour, roughly over a 24-hour day, which is really a spit in the ocean, so to speak. And to put a rig like this in place is probably going to be around $2,000. So I mean, it's not a it's a good chunk of money, but it's not a huge amount of money in the general scheme of things. And you could, put more wind turbines up, as long as you get your spacing right, and as long as your property supports it. But then again, you've got to be able to manage all this back into your overall solar rig or home off-grid rig. Brain's a bit foggy this morning, sorry. And you really have to kind of question whether it really is actually worth it. Hydro is probably the way to go if your property supports it. And if your property doesn't support it, then there are ways and means of doing that. But again, that's a pretty reasonable investment to get that consistency of power generation during the off cycle for solar in play. So I guess this ramble is now talking about energy and off-grid again, which strangely enough is kind of a topic that I think about a lot at the moment, because plans and soon ordering and then building. So anyway, back to wind. is it worth it? One of my concerns was around the longevity of the turbines. Apparently, and I can't confirm this, but if you look after them, they don't need a lot of maintenance. But if you do have to maintain them, so be it. But generally speaking, a good turbine will go the distance. And the distance, I mean, you could get 20 years out of it. But again, you should reasonably expect that there's going to be a lot of parts that you're going to need to replace, because stupid things are going to happen because you have something that's way more exposed poking up out of your property, and therefore more subject to the vagaries of acts of God and all that kind of stuff. So, don't know. But anyway, one should be reasonably optimistic. I always factor all my stuff over 10 years anyway, so anything beyond that is gravy, as they say. But it doesn't really kind of stack up against the absolute longevity of solar cells. And then I'm ignoring batteries and things in this. I mean, even inverters and stuff, to be honest, should last the distance, but really don't have those long warranties anyway. So I guess we are kind of comparing apples with apples. But the big thing is, 40 kilowatt hours of power generation for a month. 1.3 kilowatts per day on average. And that's not strictly accurate, because, you're going to have days where there's just no wind, no power generation. And then you can have days where there's quite a bit of wind and you're going to get a lot more. So I guess where I'm going in a roundabout, rambly sort of way, if you're still following me and haven't put me onto mute, I think wind is worthwhile looking into. But unless you've got a lot of it on your property, and that's an expensive proposition. If I was to put mind exercise, let's say I was going to put 10 of these turbines on my property at roughly, I'm going to call it $2,000 each for this, because realistically it's probably going to be that, by the time you put cables and stuff in and extra charge controllers and combiner boxes and things. 10 of these, that's generating 400 kilowatt hours per month, which is a considerable amount of power. That's generating over 10 kilowatt hours per day. Again, assuming reasonable conditions, average conditions, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty good proposition. 10 kilowatt hours of energy production all day throughout the day. That's 10,000 watts though. So we're still talking about dividing that, roughly by our 20. So we're only talking about 500 watts per hour. 500 watts per hour, you can get that from two relatively inexpensive solar panels. So where's the attraction? The attraction is solar panels don't generate 24 hours a day. You need to allow for cloudy days, rainy days, stormy days. Those days when something basically decides it's going to take a dump on one of your panels, or a tree branch gets blown in, and suddenly that wonderful serial connection that you put in place, and yes, I know you can do hybrid with parallel and serial and all that kind of stuff to mitigate against it, but basically your serial connection breaks and you've suddenly got sweet bupkis when it comes to power generation that day, unless you notice it and have the necessary alarms on your systems. Sorry about the colour changes, I'm moving back and forth against the light early in the morning here. Another beautiful day today. So wind. I've decided to park the wind for now. that 10 turbine hypothetical model, I mean, that's $20,000, 10 times 2. You can buy a lot of rig for $20,000 that doesn't really, require having to stick up all these poles all over the property in the hopes of capturing some wind. If you've listened to me ramble about solar, particularly sizing your solar and thinking about your off-grid requirements, and this applies to grid tied as well, but less so for grid tied because, you're only really going to use it if the power is actually off for some reason, or you choose to as a battery backup more often than not. So the sizing requirements for those tend to be very different. But we're talking, all of our power falls into generation, capturing whatever resource and converting it to electricity. Storage, it's the big one. Ensuring that you have enough capacity to capture as much overflow as you can, if you have it, and make sure that is appropriately sized for whatever you consider to be a rainy day, okay, or rainy days, or days when you really need, you have to live entirely off the battery bank. And 3 is, the size of your ability to actually push power through your infrastructure and convert that, which is inverters and things. It's no good having 10 kilowatts of solar panels if you can only put 3 kilowatts through your inverter, that kind of thing. And you think that's pretty basic, but there are some extra bits to it. But anyway, so stuff to think about. Just tapping quickly on the hydro since I'm rambling and the weather's nice and I'm kind of enjoying my walk. I'm curious about these cows, but I'm not sure I want to go down. I think they may be way down on our neighbour's property for some reason. Anyway, so going with this hydro I think is a good way to go. You can build your own hydro rig. There's a lot of fiddling around and stuff with pipes and what have you to get that in. There's a lot of math with hydro, don't get me wrong, and I can talk about that in another topic. It's not difficult math, but you need to be aware of it. It's the same with wind and it's the same with solar. If you haven't gathered, you can't avoid it. You have to math it. You have to understand what you're trying to achieve, and just math it basically. But hydro, I think, is something that I was going to park much longer as like if we'll get around to it, we'll get around to it. But and also because the stream that we have on the property is, at this stage at least, until we do some more work on it, is not wholly reliable, or even necessarily long enough to support hydro for long periods of time. So there's a lot of don't know considerations here at the moment. And again, you can get away with, you can mitigate against that to a degree. But yeah, I'll do some discussion on that probably when we get down there and do some property walks and show you some of the wild woolly trees and things that very exciting that are going to get removed, replaced, whatever. And hydro placement may be a consideration in that. So anyway, finishing this out. So you're all very patient. Couple more days to go until the next really bad day. I kind of get a little bit burned out. So apologies for that. definitely very cool. Definitely an option for powering smaller devices or when you really don't have any other options. But you know, if I was to make a go of it, I think it would probably take a couple of turbines to make it reasonable. You know, that would generate on average 100 watts per hour, which is not a lot, but it you know, kind of adds up. But you know, I'd probably be spending about $4,000 on that. So $4,000 buys a lot of solar and buys a lot of battery for your solar. And the initial kit that I'm looking at the moment is coming in around 10k, including panels. And because there's only two of us, and because we're starting out, and I'll spec this and diagram it and obviously video it as I fiddle around with large battery banks and chunks of copper. This is just a 10 kilowatt hour off-grid system. It has a good chunk of solar going into it though. But again, you know, bear in mind that Dawn and I are going down first. We're going to be in an RV. The RV needs 30 amp. We will need extra power because, you know, we want to run better AC, and we may need climate control in the machine room as well, which is going to have some storage and a freezer. So, you know, there's some what you probably consider heavy draw appliances. So we definitely need that power generation, and we definitely need that power storage. But we're not in a position where we're basically firing this thing up to run a whole house, and probably won't be for quite some time. So the initial build is really sized around that. And if we do find that the battery capacity is not sufficient, and again I'll talk about this, we'll just spring for another battery and add that to the rack. It holds up to 6 batteries, so plenty of room for storage there. I don't think power generation will be an issue. It's going to be storage for when the sun's not shining, even though the sun is a massive incandescent gas, a gigantic nuclear furnace. They might be giants reference. It's just going to be a pretty much finger in the air, try it out, and then we'll just scale accordingly. All right, that's enough of a ramble today. You all are awesome. I hope you have an amazing Friday. If you're working, get through it, and hope you enjoy the weekend. Hopefully the weather is good where you are. You get some stuff done that you mean to do. Take care, be well. Kia ora. Ciao for now. Talk again tomorrow.